Welcome back to your Essentials group. Again, my name is David Barr, and I'm one of the clergy here at St. George's. And this week we enter into the last major narrative sequence in Genesis. Not the last session, just the last big story. It's the life of Joshua. And just as a suggestion, this set of narratives, chapters 37 to 50, I think it's really worth reading as a whole. Even if you haven't been following along with the larger reading plan, it might be worth taking it up, even now. The story of Joseph makes up this huge portion of Genesis. It's often kind of overlooked, and so it's really important. And not only is it important to the rest of Genesis and to Scripture as a whole, but I think it has some of the most interesting storytelling in the whole Bible. So it's fun to read. But now back to Joseph. So remember, Joseph is one of Jacob's sons, and in our section of Genesis, he is living in Egypt. And there is a long backstory here, which again, you should go check out. But basically, his brothers sell him into slavery, and he ends up being the head servant in the household of one of Pharaoh's officers named Potiphar. And Pharaoh, as you probably know, is one of the most powerful figures in the ancient world. And so it's helpful to think of Potiphar like you would a major general, like a 4-star general or something. And so Joseph runs his whole household, and that's a huge job. Joseph is even allowed to serve and manage Potiphar's household when no one is around. So he's built this trust with Joseph. Potiphar even notices, it says at the beginning, that God is with Joseph. And so this trust that Potiphar has with Joseph is what leads us to the drama of today's reading. Our story says that Joseph was an attractive man, and Potiphar's wife eventually took notice of him. And she made an advance on him, not just once, but twice. So imagine his predicament here. He could sleep with her, but then he would be unfaithful to God and to his master. Or he can resist and offend someone who has incredible power over him. So he ends up making the morally right decision, and he resists not once again, but twice. And the second time when he runs away, it says that she grabs his cloak, and this proves to be an enormous problem. And I don't need to detail the rest of the story here, but Joseph ends up in prison, understandably. And this story, of course, is only part of a larger story. It doesn't end here in prison, as you'll see later on in the coming weeks. But I think there are a few things that are incredibly revelatory and important not to miss. The story, again, at the very beginning, makes it abundantly clear that God is with Jacob. God is with Jacob like he was with Abraham. It makes it abundantly clear that God is with Joseph in the same way that he was with Joseph and Isaac and Abraham. And yet notice that here in this place, in this story where it ends, God being with Joseph doesn't keep him out of trouble. In other words, being blessed by God, having him be with you, having his favor on you, does not necessarily mean that injustice won't happen to you. Joseph is obedient to God. And I even wonder if he didn't want to be. And yet he is thrown into prison. And I think that this can be a hard theological truth for us to wrestle with sometimes. And so as you enter in your discussion, I'd encourage you to think on that. Have you ever been unjustly punished or been at the total mercy of some scenario that you didn't have any control over? It happens to followers of God. It happens to Joseph. Now, there's another thing that's important to discern is how this fits into the broader sort of covenantal movement of the book of Genesis. If you'll remember, Genesis, as I've tried to show again and again, is the story of God creating a people, making this one particular family, which grows into a bigger than family, a whole nation, his own chosen body. And so a question I'd like for you to ask in this discussion is, how does this story of Joseph fit into the larger story? And in the history of Christian interpretation, this is the way that wise Christians have interpreted this story in the past. They tried to do this at every turn. And one of the ways they did this was they thought that Joseph's commitment to not sleep with Potiphar's wife is not simply about marital fidelity or Joseph's moral commitments, but it's also about the clan of Abraham and Isaac, Jacob, now Joseph, being and remaining a distinct people. And so here's one of the really basic questions in the Joseph story for lots of Christians before us, and I think for us today as well. So will Joseph, now living in Egypt, not simply just retain his faith in the God who is with him, but will he remain a son of the chosen people? That is, will he remain one of the clan, one of the sons of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, even when it's hard? Or will he become an Egyptian? And I think we'll see how this works out later, but you need to keep this question in your mind as you read the story of Joseph. Will Joseph and his family actually remain distinctly God's? Will they choose to follow the Lord and to take up the mantle of being his own chosen people, of living out a character that reflects him? Or they just become like some other nation, like Egypt? So I think the same is true for us as Christians as well. Will we be distinct? Will we be a people who celebrate and manifest the character of Christ, or will we be just like another culture, say America? So that's a question I hope that you will ponder today. How do we relate to the cultures around us? What might it look like to be faithful? And then also, what, again, might it look like to live under circumstances that we do not control? This is, of course, a very simple story in some ways, but I hope you see that there's quite a bit to discuss here, and I hope you have a great conversation. Thanks.